for tuning in. Week 2, Advent and the Arts. This looks like a wonderful crowd. So I'm not going to talk a whole lot. Just a bit of housekeeping. Do please mute yourselves and then unmute when you want to say something. We'll be playing some music today. So just, yeah, this is one of these world of Zoom things that we do. Yeah, I'm gonna turn it on over to our wonderful director of music, Angela Tips, and she is gonna walk us through cantata number 140. JS Box, Angela.
I'm delighted to be doing this. I learned a lot in I've taught this a couple of times in the last few years, but I haven't really delved into it like I got a chance to do. So I'm really grateful to do something other than trying to put little choirs in little boxes and make them all look like they're normal, one of those virtual choirs. I want you to know I have on makeup and lipstick because you can see my face and not with a mask. So, that hasn't happened for several weeks. So anyway, aren't y'all lucky? So Michael, are you ready you've got the scripture lesson pulled up because he's going to be my assistant. I really want you to unmute and ask questions. And Father Michael, if you will also monitor the chat room for me, if you have questions or comments or things you want to know about, if you'll chat that, then Michael, just interrupt me anytime that we want to explore something deeper. So this is cantata number 140. One of my favorite hymns for Advent is Wachet auf, ruft uns die Stimme. Sehr gut, yeah? Which is Sleepers Wake or Wake Awake. And usually on the first Sunday of Advent, David Lauke plays the chorale, and we do a chorale prelude where he's playing the melody and I'm playing all the other stuff. So I couldn't let the first Sunday of Advent go by without playing that. And I realized during communion that it's tough to play all three of those lines at the same time. I hadn't had to do that for many years. And I got to that second section and went, oh my, I hope I can play this right. So I missed David being with me last week. All right, so we have three things we want to accomplish, and I hope I'm not too long-winded and we can get that done in a timely manner. We need to talk a little bit about Protestant hymns because this is what that is all based on. Then we'll talk a little bit about cantatas specifically, and especially this one. And then we'll listen to 3 movements of the 7 movements that there are. And I think we can get all this done if I don't talk too much. Let's set it up a little bit by talking about the hymns of the Protestant church. When Martin Luther came along and the Protestant Reformation happened, it created a need for music to serve the liturgy of this new church, basically, a non-Catholic Christian worship service. And so composers really didn't want to use chant anymore because that was, considered too papist. They needed to write in the vernacular, in the language that the people were speaking. It was a huge component of what Luther thought was wrong with the church at the time. And he also wanted the congregation to join in, rather than, you have to understand that at the time, before the Reformation, in the Catholic Church, everything was in Latin. A lot of it was based on plain chant or plain song or Gregorian chant. All of those are kind of the same thing. And it was done sort of for them by the priest and the choir. And the congregation didn't really participate. So that's all set on its end now. And all of those things have to be changed. So musicians were tasked with writing a lot of new music that was easy enough for congregation members to sing. They wanted to make it simple enough. So they also used a lot of folk songs or tunes that are already out and then put other text to them. So that's what we're kind of setting up in terms of why this particular hymn was written. And so a hymn, as I tell my kids in my music class, strophic form is a nice little Jeopardy word, should you ever need to do this. There's going to be a lot of Jeopardy words on this one. Means that you sing the same music, but you put different text to it for different stanzas. Our hymnal is full of those. So you would have you could tell a whole story by just adding stanzas rather than learning new music. And chant is very different than that. It had several different sections of it. It was very long, kind of hard to sing. And so that's definition of what a hymn is. Multiple verses set to the same music, so it was a bit more memorable. They were syllabic. Now, that means like one syllable to the note, like a mighty fortress is our God, rather than chant, which was Hallelujah, right? Very different. And the rhythms needed to be kind of steady and singable, 4-part harmony accompanied by organ. So that's what we're sort of tasked with in this new Lutheran church, right? And a chorale is simply another name for a hymn of this particular era. So hymn and chorale for what we're going to say is the same thing. Okay. Questions so far? We're good? I don't like just hearing myself talk, so jump in there anytime. So this particular tune was written by Philip Nicolai, who was a German Lutheran pastor. And he wrote this, I didn't know this until I was researching, during a plague. And I'm not sure that I couldn't ever find what specific sort of disease this was, but 1597-98, about 1,300 people died just in his area. And he was doing about 30 burials in one day at one point. So I think it's interesting that we're coming back to this particular hymn in a time of plague that was written, 400 years ago, that same kind of thing, 500 almost. So I want to show you the music of it. There are two versions of it. The Lutherans had a little bit more rhythm to them than we Episcopalians tend to have. So the first one is this: sleepers wake, a voice astounds us. The shout of I'm sorry, I can't see. The shout of rampart guards around us. Awake, Jerusalem, arise. And that's the original rhythm that was kind of syncopated and jazzy and rhythmic, but that seemed to be a little too fun, perhaps. So look at it in its current form. This is out of our hymnal. Sleepers wake, a voice astounds us. The shout of ramparts guards around us. Sorry about breathing. Awake, Jerusalem, arise. Right. So it's just a little bit more regular rhythm, not quite as fun. For instance, in our hymnal, we've got two versions of A Mighty Fortress. The first one that Luther wrote is, a mighty fortress is our God, a bulwark never failing, which is fun. We changed it to a mighty fortress, right? So, but probably it's easier to sing that way. So you've got two different versions of it. Now we need to look at the melody a little bit. There are 9 short phrases in each stanza of this text, of this tune rather. And the first, musicians like to assign sort of letter names to things that are recurring. So if you've got something that's repeated, you would call it A. So the first section is A. Bum, 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 bum. Those are the first 3 phrases. Got that? You could sing them just right like that now. Then we repeat that. It's different text, but the same phrases. And then you have like 5 different phrases that are in a totally different style. So our form would be A, and B. And that becomes important when you're going to hear the cantata itself. All right, so that's the tune, that's the melody of this chorale. And I would love for Father Michael to read the passage from Matthew that this is based on, the parable of the wise and foolish virgins. Would you do that for us, please, sir?
Yes, I will. Then the kingdom of heaven will be like this. 10 bridesmaids took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. When the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them. But the wise took flasks of oil with their lamps. As the bridegroom was delayed, all of them became drowsy and slept. But at midnight there was a shout, "Look, here is the bridegroom. Come out to meet him." Then all these bridesmaids got up and trimmed their lamps. The foolish said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out." But the wise replied, "No, there will not be enough for you and for us. You had better go to the dealers and buy some for yourselves." And while they went to buy it, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went with him into the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later, the other bridesmaids came also, saying, "Lord, Lord, open to us." But he replied, "Truly, I tell you, I do not know you. Keep awake, therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour."
So Philip Nicolai writes this text based on that parable, and there are 3 verses to it. The first one is that call to arms, if you will, wake up, when there's the second coming happening. The second verse describes what it would be like for the bridegroom, Christ, coming to take his bride, the church, into this wedding feast. And Bach writes a particular sort of style to, I can just picture the music with the entrance to the processional end of the feast. And then the third stanza talks about more of a revelation uh, setting on that, the 19th and 21st chapters of that, where this glorious scene in heaven where all of the saints are worshiping together. So that's the text that's set to this tune that we just talked about. All right, so that's the first section. That's talking about the hymn itself. Now, a cantata is several movements of a work for orchestra, chorus, and soloists. You know, this time of year, we usually have lots of performances of Handel's Messiah, which is an oratorio. Think of a cantata on steroids, and that's what an oratorio is. A cantata is like a scaled down version of one of those major works, about 30 minutes or so. All right, so we have J.S. Bach writing these cantatas for his church at St. Thomas in Leipzig. Now, this is the third and final job he had. He spent some time in Weimar as a church musician. Then he went to Curtin and he worked for the court, a court musician. And then now he's at St. Thomas as the cantor, which means the organist and choir master. And it was his job at the time to write music like a cantata every Sunday, plus holidays. I'm very thankful that my job is not contingent on that, because I'd be screwed. I could not do that. But he cranked it out every single week, right? And he signed them all SDG, which is Latin, Soli Deo Gloria, to the glory of God alone. So this cantata, number 140, because there are a lot of them, was written on what I guess we would call now Christ the King Sunday. And Father Michael's lesson last week, which I listened to yesterday, was telling a little bit about how in certain times of the lectionary, the last few weeks are very eschatological, that have this awake text, which we think of as Advent. So when we get to year A at the end and go, wait, that's Advent, it all kind of blends together. But so this was written on Christ the King, for Christ the King Sunday, which is right before Advent. So at the time in the Baroque Reformed Church, Advent was quite a penitential time, very similar to Advent. And you couldn't really do ornate music. There would not be these grand cantatas with orchestra. So it was Bach's last chance to show off a little bit before Christmas time. So he had 4 weeks of not being able to compose these. So he was kind of showing off a little bit, rightfully so. And we also need to know that in the worship service, I mean, if I tried to put a 30-minute workout for y'all, you'd go, we're not having it, because we got to get to the restaurant before the Baptists. But in Bach's time, the services were about 4 hours long. And it would not be unusual for a sermon to last 1 hour. Let's not get any ideas, the two of you on here. So it would not be unheard of for a 30-minute section of that to be a cantata. That was kind of just the norm. Bach had 12 people in the choir, men in unchanged voices and boys. We think of Bach's works as these grand, big works, and some of them are, but his church really only had a dozen singers. And so the orchestra was fairly small as well. And you see the instruments that were used for this. That's a picture of his church, by the way, of St. Thomas Church there. This is the Netherlands Bach Society. This is the recording we're going to listen to. It's my favorite because I like the tempos that they picked. Some of them were just extremely long and kind of sucked all the energy out of this beautiful piece of music. So we're going to play this group's recording. It's in 7 movements or 7 sections. And what we're going to focus on are the 3 choruses, the first, the fourth, and the 7th movement. One other Jeopardy word you need to know is called ritornello, which is Italian for return. And in 2 of these 3 movements that we're going to talk about, the concept of a ritornello is important because it's a section that keeps getting repeated. You might have a phrase of the hymn, and then the strings will play a little something, something, and then the next phrase comes and the strings play a little something, something. So that concept is important to know so when you're listening to this. Do we have questions so far before we listen? I always want to stop and make sure that you're not dying to know some things that maybe I can answer. At least you're not all, like haven't put your videos on dark like my students do.
Angela, I have a question.
Yes. Oh, thank goodness.
And I may have missed it. Did Bach write the text as well?
No, Philip Nicolai wrote that text.
Okay, he wrote the text.
So he wrote the text and the tune.
Okay, got it.
And Bach just took that and went with it.
Yep.
All right, well, let's get started then. The first movement is with chorus and orchestras. The first time we're going to hear this tune. And so I want you to listen for these things. I want you to listen for how simple the chorale melody comes. Da, 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 dee, dum. It would have to be simple. The congregation needs to be able to sing it, right? And clear cut, the sopranos have that melody and it's just right there hovering over everything. It's just masterfully done. Then the concept of having those chorus parts interrupted by this orchestra ritornello, the repeated interlude. At the beginning, the chorus, the sopranos are singing the melody, and the altos and tenors and basses are kind of playing off each other, imitative kind of choral style. And then there are a couple of things at the very beginning in the introduction that makes a sort of sense of urgency. One of them is the rhythm, bum, ba bum, ba bum, ba long, short, long, short, long, short, long. And that's where I think of just this, think of one of the royal queens and kings walking into a big banquet hall, right? And then the second part is ba ba bum, ba 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 bum, ba ba bum, ba 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 bum, ba ba bum. This little figure of syncopation that gets played between the woodwinds and the strings. And then the third part of the introduction, all of this is in like 16 bars. It's amazing that you have this series of rising scales. So I think it'll make more sense once I sort of shut up and let you hear it. Here's a little bit of the introduction. And I think I'm gonna, let's see what I can do here to put both things so that you can see it, but you can also see this handy listening guide. Can you tell I teach this for a living, do this for a living? I love my little PowerPoints and all my little shtick. Come on. All right. And there's always some sort of technical glitch in there. So let's see here. That does it, right? Okay. So here's the introduction and the first ritornello. And I'm going to kind of talk all over it a little bit. Long. Groups. Chorale. Ritornello, please. Praise. Ritornello. Third phrase. Now we're going to hear those three phrases, new text, but those same three phrases, same music. Sopranos on the top. Ritornello, this is almost exactly like the first section, just the text is different. Basically, that's the first two sentences. These sections, it's different music now. The organist back there in the back, nobody can see. There's a ritornello always between beats. Now listen to the word Alleluia and see how different the music is when you sing it. The bass is coupled. And finally, the sopranos come in and they bring become the last three phrases of the choir, interrupted by these notes. Ritornello. Almost like the beginning. Sorry, not yet. Now remember the beginning and those three motives? Long, short, long, short, long. And the thing between the two notes. All right, let's pause there. I think we have something from the chat room. Is that correct? No?
I don't.
Okay. I thought I saw something happening there. There you go. Well, yeah, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Yes, I love all the little interjections. Oh, that's me. Okay, sorry. It was too private. Sorry. But yeah, there you go. That was from Lauke. Who should know this? But don't you love the setting of it is so beautiful. The camera work on this video, because they're pointing to the things that have the melody or the important parts there. It's just really quite lovely. What questions might you have? Shall we keep going? So the fourth movement is the one that David and I have played. David, did you hear me say that I missed you terribly last week when I had to play all this by myself?
I did hear that.
Well, yeah, we got to let this pandemic get going so I can play music with my friends again. So the second and third are a recitative, which is a fancy word for just kind of an introduction to an aria, like in an opera setting. And it's lovely. It's quite lovely. But for our purposes, we're going to cut right to number 4, which is unison strings. It's quite a concept. If you look at the music, it's just, hang on, I don't know if we can do this way. I don't know if this is going to work. If I were really good, I'd have scanned this in. Can you see this at all? A little bit closer. It has just one line of music plus the bass line, plus then the tenor part that comes in. So it's quite small in scale for a small orchestra like this. So we've got this recurring bum ba-da-dum ba-dum 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 da-da-dum da-dum da-dum, and that's that ritornello, big fancy word that keeps returning. And above that, then the tenors sing the chorale tune, again interrupted phrase by phrase, right? So let's see if I can get on the right page here. 15:18 it says. And there's really, it's very simple, but it's quite lovely and beautiful. Let's see if I can get, this is the end of the third movement. Hey, that's pretty good. Listen to the bass line. It's kind of a walking bass. My feet. that ritornello, that phrase. We're going to hear those first three phrases again with new text. Two A sections, ritornello. Now we're going to get ready for the B section. Now the ritornello changes to sort of a minor key feel. Last three phrases. Just one of the most gorgeous pieces of music ever written, right? One thing I wanted to talk about was the concept of something called figured bass. The organist back there in the nether regions would be playing, there's one line of music, the bass line. I'll show this again, I'm not sure it's going to be helpful, but the bass line is all that the organist or harpsichordist would see, and all these little numbers there that would tell them, okay, this is a first inversion chord, this is a second inversion minor, lower the third, all that kind of stuff. It's like a shorthand. It's like when Nashville musicians play Nashville number system, and they kind of know by code. So this is the organist just kind of filling in the chords, filling in the chords, playing the bass line with the cellist, but then just knowing instinctively what chords those are. I think is amazing. My predecessor as an organ teacher, Holly Brecht, can do that by sight. Yeah. Questions? I can't believe you don't have questions. Somebody's chatting something. Tell me what that is.
Christine asks, how long would the choir and orchestra have to rehearse?
Oh, that's a very good question to which I don't know the answer. You've stumped me. I don't know. I imagine, well, wouldn't there be, I guess the boys would be in school, wouldn't they have a choir boy kind of thing there? And they would be learning it all week? Well, I know we need to move on, so I'm going to play this last movement. Speaking of a formula, so you've had the big chorus, you've had a solo, you've had that sweet movement that we just did, and then another solo. And then by the time we've gotten to the end, the congregation would sing along. So the music for this one is the strings, the orchestra is doubling the voices in plain old 4-part harmony, and the congregation would have been invited to sing. So let's listen to this last section. It's the end of that 6th movement. There he is, making it up. So there we have it, friends. I really like, this is my new favorite discovery, this Netherlands Bach Society. I've used it a lot with my students because I like it visually as well as the sound. So I would encourage you to look for some more of those. Now we've got questions, I'm sure, and we probably need to, I don't know what our time is like. I'll let the Right Reverend.
Oh, not yet.
Okay.
No, sorry, I'm not a right reverend at this point, which is good.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, that's our bishop. That's our bishop, but that's okay. Yeah. So David Lauke's asking, would these movements be inserted into different parts in the service, or sort of played all together?
I think it's all together. They would just boom. Here's your. It's like a big old offertory hymn. You know.
Great.
And I don't know whether they had hymnals. I'm not sure how they got to know how to sing. Lewis, I'm seeing yours as well. Remember that, not just writing the piece, transcribing the parts without a printing press or any software, to get that done week by week. Think of all the challenges it takes to make that happen, So I don't know the answer to that either. These are all great questions that someone else will research and get back to us on.
Thank you, Angela. We have time for maybe one or two more questions, or just thoughts. Yeah, this was just so awesome. Yeah,
I'm just glad I went before Steve Severn and Lauren Gamble.
Yeah. Set the bar pretty high, Angela. I was struck. I'll just sort of share this. As I was listening and hearing just how just absolutely glorious this music is. But then as you were walking us through it, Angela, and pointing out the different sort of the main theme and everything else, and the variation and how it goes to minor and then back to major and all this, and then it's everybody at the end. What struck me is just how the text and the music run parallel, and how similar that is to actually our scripture and our whole sense of the Christian story. That there's a main theme that runs throughout, and there's variation on that theme, and sometimes that theme gets kind of minor and gets kind of not but just is a little bit dissonant. But then, as this text reminds us, at the end, everybody's together singing, and what they're singing is, of course, the text that is put to music in this hymn. So there's almost a meta level of what's going on. So I don't know if that just struck me today, that what Bach is doing in the music mirrors or parallels, you know, the Christian story, which I think is part of why it's so powerful.
And I really like the Protestant approach to include the whole congregation in music as part of the worship, which is a real big innovation in the Reformation. One of the great gifts it gives to the church, I think.
Yeah. I would echo completely what Alex says as well. What a treat for us today. Bravo. Yeah. So thank you, Angela. Thank you all for tuning in. Wonderful teaching. Made this music come alive in a new way. And this is week 2. We have 2 more to go also. So we are going to play a little bit of an audible on you. I hope that's okay. Next week, we are going to be doing visual art. Stephen Severn has to be out of town next weekend for a family thing. And so we're gonna swap. So we're gonna do visual art with Lauren next week. So this is just gonna continue to be such a wonderful blessing to have all of you part of our congregation, able to speak and teach like this. So that is wonderful. That is all I have, other than to say thank you, Angela.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it. Thanks for letting me put on lipstick.
Yeah. All righty. Take care,
I
everyone.
got to go practice for church in a few minutes, right?
Yeah. We'll see you soon in
Thanks.
church.